Thank you, Senator Limmer. The reason I asked the question is because behind the proposal of trying to figure out how do we fund the police, how do we fund public safety, we've had a very long-term conversation about how we do the business of policing our communities. How do we put policy behind the funding that we secure for law enforcement? Because the two go together. That's what we do here. We figure out where is the funding going to do, how is it going to be used, what kind of activities is this funding being used for, and we had very ample conversations about the reforms that we need to implement in law enforcement. And I believe that we agree because we passed a bill with bipartisan support to reform law enforcement. So members, I'm going to tell you how much money we have paid because that number actually exists, and we talked about it multiple times because that triggered the conversation about why we need to reform the business of law enforcement. We have paid $68 million in the last 10 years, and most of that has been paid in the last 4 years. And that number is growing exponentially. And it's growing exponentially for multiple reasons. I don't have the time to go into that. But what I can tell you is that many of your cities, Mr. Chairman and members, are now going to have to use municipal bonds to pay for these claims because they are growing exponentially. So your counties and your cities are going to get in debt, and people are going to be making money. Banks are going to be making money to pay for police misconduct. So the question I ask this morning, members, and perhaps you talk about the relevance of this, is when we put money into paying for law enforcement, we really need to ask the question as responsible lawmakers, how is this money going to be used? Do we have enough transparency into the process? Do we know if we're training our law enforcement officers adequately? Are we investing enough in that training? What is the capacity of these cities, these counties to pay for that? So law enforcement officers are human beings, just like we are, that are in need of this training and this capacity and that skill to serve the community. They have some of the toughest jobs. And what we are saying here is we need to know how that happens. Is that training relevant today? Is it adequate? Are we paying for adequate training? Members, this bill doesn't do that. What this bill does is says, we're giving you money to do whatever you want. We don't want to know because we don't care to know. Just go ahead, use the money however you want. If we were responsible legislators who truly care about the job of law enforcement officers today, we actually will be asking the question. So members, I encourage you to vote no and go back to the conversation and really ask these difficult questions that we need to ask. My constituents are asking you to please be responsible and do not use the trauma and the painful moment that my city is living right now, and that many of you are using for your political gain and your political purposes to divide our community and to divide this body.